The Honourable Judith Collins.
Speaker, I'd like to thank the member who's resumed his seat for reminding me of why the last time I voted Labour was 1984. He's reminded me of 1984 when Labour was in government and what happened when there was a last housing crisis in Auckland. That's when the house prices plummeted. People ended up with negative equity and interest rates at 28%. And that is, in fact, exactly what would happen if a Labour government gets to the Treasury benches again. You need to be sensible about this issue, Mr. Speaker, and the issue is the matter of supply and demand. The fact is, in 1984, people left this country in droves to get away from a Labour government, and a very sensible move it was for them too. Some of us who stuck it out, we were grateful to a national government to come in 1990, but what's happened, Mr. Speaker, is that the Metropolitan Urban Limit in Auckland, under a Labour-led Auckland Regional Council headed by Mike Lee, put in place an artificial limit on the growth of Auckland, and that was in the late 1990s. That has been the major issue around what's happened in Auckland. That and the fact that Aucklanders are no longer leaving Auckland, they're staying put, and people are coming to Auckland because Auckland is a great place to live. If you can get around the transport issues, which I hope will start to be alleviated once the expansion of the Southern Motorway starts in October this year, right through my electorate. And I have to say that speaking about this particular issue and the measures in the budget, as I think the budget is a very measured response. The last thing we want to do is to actually end up with a situation where Aucklanders can't afford their homes anymore, the interest rates go up, which is what happened under a Labour government. It's really important to think about a balanced budget as a bit like balancing the budget of a household, actually. Most of us know we can only spend what we have. We can't go off spending money we don't have. And if we continue to do that, we're going to end up in a very difficult position. In this particular case, one of the things that having a balanced budget does for the economy is it actually keeps interest rates low. The government is not competing so much with private enterprise or business to actually take money, to get money to spend on schemes. The government is actually not playing a part in putting up interest rates. The interest rates now are the lowest that they've been in 60 years. So what that actually means is, despite the doom and gloom from those who want to talk down our economy, despite that, we've actually seen households in New Zealand, Kiwi households, saving in the last 5 years every single year. And the last time that happened was in 1995, before this government came in. And that actually tells me, Mr. Speaker, is that this government's balancing its budget and not overspending and leaving more money with people is actually meaning that the people can in fact afford to keep paying their bills and are not getting into debt like we used to. When I look at some of the very smart things in this budget, one of the smartest things, I think, was actually giving a $25 a week increase in benefits rates for families with children, realising that people on benefits with children are the most vulnerable people we have in this country. And it's not children's fault that their parents are on benefits, but what it is doing is giving people just a little bit more help. At the same time putting huge measures and effort and funding into helping parents get to work and getting off benefits, because work, as we know, is actually the secret to getting ahead in life. When I listened to some of the discussions this afternoon, in particular one from Mrs. Eugene Sage, she says she wants more exports, but unfortunately she doesn't believe in free trade. So unfortunately that's not going to work. She also said that prices will never get better in dairying. Well, I beg to differ. I look at the world's population. Is it going smaller? No, it's going bigger. Guess what? People like protein, and the richer that countries get and richer people get, the more protein. Yes, dairying's going through a difficult time at the moment, but actually those of us who come from the dairying industry actually know that that happens every 10 years or so anyway in the dairying industry. Farmers are incredibly resilient. They are, however, not supermen or women. They are actually people who we have to give them as much help as we can. But one of the best things that we can do for these farmers is to keep interest rates low. That is the biggest thing that we can do, because many of them will have actually expanded, bought the neighbour's property, and they will have been thinking about the prices that they were then at that stage getting for their product. I listened to all the rhetoric around trade and exports, and I've heard the New Zealand First people talk about exports. Apparently they like exports. I just don't know who they want to export to, because they're certainly out against the TPPA. So let's have a look at that as a free trade agreement, just on the basis of the budget, and why it's important for us for budgets, for this budget and for those coming forward. This is a free trade agreement with the #1 economy in the world, the United States. That is actually the reason that a lot of the people who are against the TPPA are the people like dear old Professor Jane Kelsey, who I know from my university days and who we get on very well personally, but on completely opposite sides of this. See, I don't hate the United States. I'm really grateful for the United States in this world. United States, New Zealand, obviously. Australia, Australia. Brunei, Chile, Malaysia, Peru, Singapore, Vietnam, Japan, Canada, Mexico. So really, Mr. Speaker, would we seriously contemplate not being part of that sort of agreement with the biggest economy in the world, with Japan, the 4th largest economy in the world? Would we really not be part of that? Would we in fact be like those people at the UK who suddenly think they don't want to be in the European Union now? I mean, really? Do we really want to be there? Do we really want to be selling all this products to ourselves? Would we get rid of the free trade agreement we currently have, the CER with Australia? Would we get rid of the one with China? What about the one with Korea? If we're going to be principled about it, wouldn't we get rid of them all? Because the fact is, Mr. Speaker, none of them would really want to do that. And they talk about, oh, well, we don't know what's in it. Well, actually, we didn't know what was in those other agreements either until they were signed, because that, strangely enough, is how negotiations are undertaken. And it's so good to be able to speak about some of the positive things in this budget, because when I listen to the opposition, I've been listening very carefully, and it's been very disappointing, except, as I say, to remind me about why I should never vote for that lot. I've been thinking about things that we've been able to deliver, $1.5 billion in ACC cuts and levies for businesses and for individuals. So everybody who is working for a living gets a cut in their ACC levies. And I'm really pleased to see that that work is continuing. We fought very hard to make that happen. But when you're looking at things like, for instance, looking at how we can make business cheaper, better, more efficient, more jobs, better use of money, let's have a look at the RMA, or the Resource Management Act. This government went into the last election on a platform of reforming the RMA, and we would, as a party, like to see that happen. Unfortunately, the balance of power on the RMA these days is held by a party run by Mr. Winston Peters. And that party travelled all around Northland saying what they'd do for farmers. Not once did they tell them they'd never do a thing, wouldn't lift a finger, would never once give us one vote to help bring about reform in the RMA. Not once. Nobody expects the Labour Party to, because after all it was their stupid baby. No one expects the Greens to, because we all know where they are. But not once would a party that makes out it likes small business, well, it does really, doesn't it? It wants them to get smaller. Not once would that party help out this party to bring through RMA reform, something which would help Northland, the very people that they supposedly represent. Not once would they go off to Tauranga, not once would they go to Napier, not once would they go to Palmerston North, all these provincial areas, and tell them about their laziness, their absolute lack of fortitude in getting up and supporting RMA reform. So you want to see change in this country, you want to see things you want a budget that's even better than the fabulous budget we've got, bring about reform in the RMA, Mr. Speaker, bring about hope for farmers, bring about hope for businesses, and stop being against everything.
I call Fletcher Capito.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd just like to start by saying this is a budget